Berlin, April 30th, 1945, 3:30 p.m. The air in the Führer bunker tastes like concrete dust and failure. Rochus Misch sits at the telephone switchboard, headset clamped over his ears, listening to static that sounds like the death rattle of an empire. Outside, Soviet artillery pounds the Chancellery Gardens into paste. Inside, 30 feet below ground, the fluorescent lights flicker with each impact, casting shadows that dance like ghosts already mourning the living. He is 27 years old. He has been Hitler's personal bodyguard and communications specialist for 5 years. He has stood outside the Führer's bedroom door while history was made and unmade. He has placed calls to field marshals who commanded armies that no longer exist. He has watched the man he was sworn to protect dissolve from a figure of terrifying certainty into a trembling ruin who screams at maps. And now he waits. Otto Gunsch appears at the switchboard station. Tall, SS Sturmbannführer, Hitler's personal adjutant, and one of the inner circle who knows what's about to happen. His face is the color of old newspaper. Misch, he says quietly, the Führer has given his final order. Misch looks up. The static crackles. Somewhere above, Berlin is burning. What orders? Gunsch's jaw tightens. We are to dispose of the bodies, mine and his, cremate them in the garden, leave nothing for the Bolsheviks. The words hang in the stale air like smoke. Misch removes his headset slowly. His hands are steady. They've been trained to be steady. But something in his chest feels like it's collapsing, a building with its supports kicked out. When, he asks. Soon, Gunsch turns away, then stops. After it's done, you should leave. Get out if you can. There's nothing left to protect. Then he's gone, boots echoing down the corridor. Misch sits alone with the static and the distant thunder of artillery. He thinks about the oath. The blood oath sworn on bent knee, hand over heart. I swear to you, Adolf Hitler, as Führer and Reich Chancellor, loyalty and bravery. I vow to you and to those you have named to command me obedience unto death, so help me God. Unto death. But whose death and what comes after? If you've ever wondered what happened to the men who stood closest to history's most infamous dictator, you're not alone. This story was buried in interrogation transcripts, hidden in Soviet archives, and scattered across decades of silence. Hit subscribe, because what you're about to learn will shatter everything you thought you knew about loyalty, guilt, and survival. They were not monsters. That's the uncomfortable truth. They were men, young men mostly, chosen not for fanaticism, though that helped, but for competence, for physical fitness, for the ability to stand for 12 hours without complaint, for reflexes fast enough to throw themselves between a bullet and a body. The Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, Hitler's personal bodyguard regiment, was the elite of the elite, recruited from the SS, which was itself recruited from the cream of German youth. Tall, Aryan, fanatically loyal. By 1945, fewer than 30 of them remained in the Führer bunker. Rochus Misch, telephone operator and bodyguard, the last man to see Hitler alive, would outlive them all, dying in 2013 at age 96. Otto Gunsch, Hitler's personal SS adjutant, tasked with burning the Führer's body, would spend 10 years in Soviet captivity. Heinz Linge, Hitler's valet, dressed him every morning, undressed him every night, knew the Führer's most intimate habits, would face war crimes tribunals. Bruno Jesch, one of the last guards standing, would disappear into the chaos of Soviet capture and never be found. Hans Bohr, Hitler's personal pilot, flew the Führer across Europe for a decade, would lose a leg in Soviet captivity. These men had stood in rooms where decisions were made that killed millions. They had opened doors for a man whose orders set the world on fire. They had been closer to Adolf Hitler than his generals, closer than his ministers, closer, in some ways, than Eva Braun. And on April 30th, 1945, as the Soviet army closed to within 300 meters of the bunker, they faced a question none of their training had prepared them for. What do you do when the man you swore to die for decides to die without you? 3:45 p.m., the Führer's study. Heinz Linge stands outside the door. He has stood here 1,000 times. 10,000. He knows the sound of Hitler pacing, the shuffle of maps, the tirades that can last for hours. He knows the smell of the Führer's cologne, the way his left hand trembles from Parkinson's, the vegetarian meals sent down from the kitchen above. Today there is only silence. Otto Gunsch joins him. Behind them, Rochus Misch watches from the switchboard station. Martin Bormann, Hitler's secretary, chain-smokes at the conference table. Everyone knows. No one speaks. The silence stretches. 1 minute 2:05. Then a gunshot, muffled flat swallowed by concrete. Linge's hand goes to the door handle. It's locked from inside. He hesitates. You don't enter the Führer's quarters without permission ever, but the oath has a clause for this. He knocks. Once, twice. Nothing. He opens the door. The smell hits first. Cordite and almonds, the bitter scent of cyanide. Hitler sits on the sofa, slumped right, a Walther PPK 7.65 pistol near his right hand. Blood pools on the armrest, drips onto the carpet. Eva Braun beside him, head tilted back, lips blue. Cyanide, no gunshot for her. Linge stands frozen in the doorway. This is the man he dressed this morning, helped into his uniform jacket, straightened his iron cross, the man who thanked him quietly for his service. Now just meat and chemistry. Gunsch pushes past, checks for pulse. Nothing. He looks at Linge. Get the blankets, we move them now. They carry the bodies up the bunker stairs wrapped in wool blankets. Hitler weighs almost nothing, a husk of the man who once commanded millions. 4 men, Gunsch, Linge, Bormann, and another guard whose name history lost, haul them into the Chancellery garden. The garden is a crater field. Shell holes, twisted metal, the skeletal remains of a fountain. Soviet snipers are 200 meters away. Bullets occasionally whine overhead. No one cares. The Reich is over. This is just housekeeping. They place the bodies in a shell crater. Gunsch pours gasoline from jerry cans, 20 liters 30, soaking the blankets until fumes shimmer in the air. He strikes a match. The fire catches slowly, then roars. Black smoke coils into the gray Berlin sky. Rochus Misch watches from the bunker entrance. He has seen death before. He was wounded 3 times on the Eastern Front, but this is different. This is not a soldier dying for a cause. This is a God revealed as kindling. The fire burns for 3 hours. The smell, oil, burning wool, something else, drifts through the bunker corridors. People gag, cover their faces, but no one leaves. They watch the smoke like it's the last sacrament of a religion they no longer believe in. By evening, the bodies are charred beyond recognition. Gunsch and Linge shovel the remains into a makeshift grave, cover it with dirt. Inadequate, hasty, the work of men who know Soviet tanks will roll over this ground in hours. Mission accomplished. The Führer is gone. Now the real question begins. What do we do? May 1st, 1945, dawn. The bunker smells like unwashed bodies, cigarette smoke, and despair. The remaining occupants, staff, secretaries, guards, cluster in small groups whispering. The hierarchy has collapsed. No one gives orders anymore. Or rather, everyone gives orders and no one obeys. Martin Bormann wants to negotiate surrender with the Soviets. General Krebs, Hitler's last chief of staff, has already tried. The Soviets responded. Unconditional surrender or death. Some want to break out, fight through Soviet lines, escape west to the Americans. Others want to surrender immediately. A few talk quietly about cyanide capsules. Rochus Misch sits at his switchboard, still monitoring dead lines. Habit, discipline, the motions of purpose in the absence of purpose. Heinz Linge appears. His uniform is filthy, soot-stained from the cremation. His eyes are hollow. Misch, he says, we're leaving breakout tonight. Where? West, toward the Americans. Better them than the Russians. Misch considers this. The Soviets know who they are, know what they've done. There will be no mercy. The Americans, maybe. Maybe they'll treat bodyguards as soldiers, not war criminals. What about Gunsch? Misch asks. He's staying. Someone has to destroy the files, the evidence. Linge's voice drops. He volunteered. Of course he did. Gunch, the true believer, the last priest of a dead god. That night in groups of 3 and 4, they slip out of the bunker. Mish goes with Linge and 2 others. They crawl through rubble past burning buildings, past Soviet patrols. Berlin is a vision of hell. Bodies in the streets, fires everywhere, the smell of death so thick you can taste it. They make it 3 blocks before Soviet soldiers surround them. Rifles raised, orders shouted in Russian. Mish raises his hand slowly. The war is over, his war anyway. The soldier who searches him finds his SS identification papers, reads the name, reads the rank. The soldier smiles. It is not a kind smile. "Faux regard," the soldier says in broken German. "You come with us, many questions for you." Soviet NKVD facility, East Berlin, May 1945. Rochus Mish sits in a concrete room lit by a single bulb. The chair is metal, bolted to the floor. His hands are cuffed in front of him. He has not slept in 36 hours, has not eaten in 24. The door opens. A Soviet officer enters, NKVD, the secret police, with a translator. They sit across from him, a folder thick with documents between them. "Rochus Mish," the officer says through the translator. "Leibstandart SS Adolf Hitler, personal bodyguard to the Führer, telephone operator in the Führer bunker." Mish nods. There's no point denying it. "Where is Hitler's body?" "I don't know. I saw it burning in the garden. Gunch and Linge handled the burial." The officer makes a note. "Was Hitler dead when you saw him?" "Yes." "Are you certain? Could he have escaped?" Mish almost laughs. The Soviets don't believe it. They think Hitler faked his death, fled to Argentina or Antarctica or some other fantasy. Stalin himself refuses to accept the Führer is dead. "I saw him," Mish says quietly. "Blood, bullet wound, the smell of cyanide, he was dead." The interrogation lasts 6 hours, then another session the next day, and the next. They ask the same questions in different orders, trying to catch inconsistencies. They want conspiracies, escape plots, hidden Nazi networks. Mish tells the truth. Hitler died. The Reich collapsed. There is no conspiracy, just wreckage. They don't believe him. Mish spends the next 9 years in Soviet captivity. Not as a war criminal, he was never charged, but as a prisoner of intelligence value. They move him between camps, prisons, interrogation centers. Sometimes he shares cells with other SS men. Sometimes with Wehrmacht soldiers who spit on him for being SS. Sometimes alone. He learns that Heinz Linge was captured too. Gunch as well, finally, after trying to escape west. Hans Bohr, the pilot, lost his leg to gangrene in a Soviet hospital. Bruno Jesch vanished, probably dead in the initial chaos. The camps are brutal. Forced labor, starvation rations, endless cold. Mish works in coal mines, quarries, logging operations. His hands, once trained to operate delicate telephone switchboards, grow calloused and scarred. But he survives. The same discipline that made him a good bodyguard makes him a good prisoner. Follow the rules, keep your head down, don't provoke, survive. In 1953, Stalin dies. Slowly, gradually, the USSR begins releasing German POWs. Low-level soldiers first, then higher ranks. Mish is released in 1954, 9 years after the war ended. He returns to Germany, West Germany now, and finds a country he doesn't recognize. Rebuilt, prosperous, eager to forget. The Germany he served is erased. The Germany that exists now pretends the first one never happened. He gets a job, marries, has children, tells no one what he did during the war. For 40 years, Rochus Mish is silent. West Germany, 1960s, 1980s. The other bodyguards face different fates. Otto Gunch is released from Soviet captivity in 1956. He returns to Germany and gives extensive testimony about Hitler's final days. His account becomes the authoritative source for historians, but he struggles with guilt. In interviews, he is evasive, defensive. "I was a soldier," he says. "I followed orders." He dies in 2003, never fully reconciling what he enabled. Heinz Linge is released in 1955. He writes a memoir with Hitler to the end that becomes a bestseller. Critics accuse him of sanitizing the Führer, of painting Hitler as a tragic figure rather than a monster. Linge insists he's just reporting what he saw. "I was his valet," he says, "not his conscience." He dies in 1980. Hans Bohr, the pilot, is released in 1955 after losing his leg. He too writes a memoir. He describes Hitler as a vegetarian who loved dogs. The criticism is immediate and savage. Bohr retreats from public life, dies in 1993. Others are less fortunate. Several bodyguards are tried for war crimes, not for anything they personally did, but for their membership in the SS, an organization declared criminal by the Nuremberg tribunals. Some serve prison sentences. Others are quietly absorbed back into society, their pasts erased by bureaucratic oversight and collective amnesia. A few commit suicide. The weight of what they witnessed, what they enabled, proves too much. And then there's Rochus Misch, who stays silent longest of all. 2005, Berlin. Rochus Misch is 87 years old. For 60 years he has kept his past locked away, told his children only that he served in the war. Avoided reunions, interviews, attention. But now historians find him, the last living witness to Hitler's final hours. The last man who can describe firsthand what the Führer bunker smelled like, sounded like, felt like. At first he refuses. What good does it do, he asks, the past is past. But the historians persist, and slowly, reluctantly, Misch begins to talk. He gives interviews, writes a memoir, The Last Witness, speaks to students, filmmakers, researchers. His account is clinical, detailed, almost affectless. He describes Hitler as polite, distant, ordinary in person. The reaction is fierce. Survivors, groups condemn him. He stood guard while genocide was planned, they say. He doesn't deserve a platform. Misch's response is quiet, careful. "I was a communications officer. I operated a telephone. I did not plan the Holocaust. I did not murder anyone. But yes, I was there. And that is something I have carried every day." Is it enough? Accountability without culpability. Witnessing without participating. The debate rages. The Last Guard. September 5, 2013, Berlin. Rochus Misch dies at age 96, the last of Hitler's bodyguards. His obituary appears in newspapers worldwide. Last survivor of Hitler's bunker dies. In the final interviews before his death, Misch is asked the question everyone wants answered. Do you regret serving Hitler? He pauses for a long time, then, I regret the war, I regret the suffering, I regret what Germany became, but the man I served, he trails off. The man I knew was not the man history knows. To me, he was my commander, polite, reserved. He thanked me for my service. Does that excuse what he did? No, Misch's voice is firm. Nothing excuses what he did, but you ask what I regret. I regret that I was young and believed in something that turned out to be evil. I regret that I didn't understand what I was part of until it was too late. I regret that I confused loyalty with morality. If you could go back, would you refuse to serve? Another long silence. I don't know, he says finally. I was 22 years old. I was told I was serving my country. I believed it. Can you judge a 22-year-old for believing what everyone around him believes? It is not the answer anyone wants, but it is, perhaps, the only honest one. In the end, what happened to Hitler's bodyguards? Some died in Soviet camps. Some rebuilt quiet lives and took their secrets to the grave. Some wrote memoirs that sold millions and satisfied no one. Some faced trials. Some faced only themselves. But all of them carried the same burden. They had been close to history's greatest monster and emerged with no good story to tell. They were not Schindler, saving Jews in secret. They were not Stauffenberg, planting bombs in failed resistance. They were not even enthusiastic war criminals with clear guilt. They were servants, functionaries, men who opened doors and answered phones and stood at attention for a man who used that service to orchestrate hell. And that, perhaps, is the most uncomfortable truth of all. It's easy to condemn the monsters, the Himmlers, the Goebbels, the architects of genocide. But what do we do with the guards who just guarded, the drivers who just drove, the valets who just laid out uniforms? They didn't pull triggers, but they held doors for the men who gave the orders. The bodyguards of Adolf Hitler were not innocent, but they were also not the villains history needs them to be. They exist in the terrible gray space where most of us would rather not look, the space where ordinary people enable extraordinary evil simply by showing up to work. 78 years after the bunker, we still don't know what to do with them. We want morality to be simple, heroes and villains, good and evil, black and white. But history keeps offering us gray. And in that gray, Rochus Misch sits at his telephone switchboard, listening to static, waiting for orders from a man who will be dead in an hour. In that gray, Otto Gunsch strikes a match and watches a tyrant burn. In that gray, Heinz Linge returns to a Germany that wants to forget, and spends the rest of his life trying to explain that he was just doing his job. Just following orders. We've heard that before. We rejected it at Nuremberg, said it wasn't enough. That morality demands more than obedience. But what if you didn't know? What if you were 22 and everyone you trusted said this was right? What if you were loyal to a person, not a cause, and by the time you realized the person embodied evil, you were already too deep to escape? What then? If this story made you think differently about loyalty, complicity, and the choices we make when we don't yet understand their consequences, share it. History doesn't give us easy answers, but it gives us questions we still need to ask. What happened to Hitler's bodyguards after WW2? They survived. They remembered. They carried the weight of proximity to evil. And they left us with a question: if you serve a monster without knowing he's a monster, does that make you one too? Subscribe so you never miss the stories history tried to bury, because the past isn't simple, and understanding it means wrestling with the parts that don't fit the narrative. Thank you for watching.